There's no sour grapes about this. No one ever said it was easy to get to become the leader of the free world.
Well, Joe Biden is with us now. Do you feel as if you were stuffed by those clips?
I'm not sure how you use the phrase stuffed here in Great Britain, but I don't think they tell the full story. For example, that end of that, the beginning and end of the quote with regard to Kennedy was, I said, as President Kennedy said on foreign policy, we should say on economic policy, and I applied it to economic policy. But the way the clip runs, it makes it look like I was doing something differently. But that's all past.
On the wider question, I mean, to the untutored eye, plagiarism doesn't seem to be in the same league as a public offence as adultery. If Hart can re-enter the race, why can't you?
Well, in large part because I don't want to. It's not a question of whether or not I can or I can't. My dilemma was that at the time these, quote, charges were raised, I was in the midst of what everyone characterized back at home as the single most significant domestic fight that was going on between the administration and the Congress. And that was whether or not Robert Bork should become a member of the Supreme Court. And as you will know, and there's no sour grapes about this. No one ever said it was easy to get to become the leader of the free world. My opponents decided that even though that Kinnock tape that was shown, and I quoted Kinnock extensively, and all the national press knew that occurred a month before, 3 weeks before that tape was made. They decided, with good reason, I understand it, that as the hearings began on the confirmation of this man to be Supreme Court Justice, that would be the perfect time to make me the issue as opposed to...
And you're an important member of the Judiciary Committee.
I happen to be the chairman of the committee. And the national press had written it the previous month in the following terms: Biden's first primary, Bork nomination. Biden's campaign hinges on outcome of the Bork nomination fight. And so everyone waited, which is understandable, until the day that was started, and all this began. And I was left with one of two choices. Either, I thought, I may be wrong, either drop the Bork nomination and give it to someone else to handle and go out and fight for my political life, or do my job as a senator and put my campaign on ice.
Now,
and I decided that the latter was more prudent.
Let's go to the bigger picture now. Johnny Carson on his show in America said the Democrats are in bad shape. Gary has no money, he has no staff, he has no judgment, and he's the front runner. Is Gary Hart electable?
Oh, I think Gary Hart, I don't think anyone knows that. I think Gary Hart has been underestimated by the press and by politicians. When Gary Hart decided to re-enter the race, my first instinct, and I indicated it, I thought that he would do much better than anyone expected. Now, whether that means he will be elected president remains to be seen. I don't think anyone will know the answer to that question until the voters speak, and the first time they speak will be in Iowa. And if he does well in Iowa, he could end up being the nominee.
Would you agree that the Achilles heel of the Republican frontrunner, George Bush, is the Iran Gate affair?
It seems to be that right now. Otherwise, there's nothing that seems to be able to hang around George Bush's neck. The Republicans are pushing very hard to do everything to discredit George Bush because he's so clearly the front runner. And they tried even including the reason I'm here in Great Britain, discussing the INF Treaty. Every one of the nominees or contenders attacked George Bush for his support of this INF Treaty. And then Bob Dole, I guess, figuring that it didn't make sense to stay on that path, decided to endorse the notion of the treaty, but the rest of them still attack him. So George Bush, I think, by virtue of the fact he's being so viciously attacked by his Republican colleagues, is in pretty good shape. But it is an Achilles heel, potentially.
Very briefly, who gets your prediction as the eventual nominees for both parties?
Oh, I'm not going to presume to predict on the Democratic side for fear of people...
Well, who gets your vote on the Democratic side?
Well, they all get my vote on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, my pick is George Bush. I think he'll be the nominee.
Senator Joe Biden, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.